Welcome to the Midlife Pilot Podcast. We are glad you're with us. What is it like to become a pilot in your 40s and 50s? The challenges are unique for those of us in midlife, but so are the rewards. Hosts Ben, Brian, and Ted talk learning to fly, growing as pilots, and the joy of flying to destinations. The purpose of the podcast is not to teach, but to share knowledge and experiences of being a midlife pilot. Join the Midlife Pilot community and listen in every week. We are not CFIs or particularly intelligent, so if you want to learn how to fly, talk to anyone else other than the hosts of a podcast. Even this intro was too challenging for us, and we used a robot to do it. Okay, checklists are complete. Let's get the show started.
Hello and welcome to the Midlife Pilot Podcast, where we share the experiences and challenges of flying in midlife. My name is Ben, and I'm a pilot in the Atlanta metro area. Tonight, we have a return guest, an honored guest, our friend Paul Craig, author of The Killing Zone. Also joining me tonight is, as always, it's Brian in the heart of Music Row in Nashville, Tennessee. Good evening, sir.
The Bachelorette Super Charlie is a very frigid Super Charlie right now. I'm one of the very few with power, and I feel very pleased and also guilty. But here we are. Glad we made it. And I may disappear at any moment.
You know, your string of bad luck has been going so long that, I mean, it was bound to turn around for you to at least keep your power for a little while.
As soon as you say
I'm very happy.
Go boom,
yeah,
right?
Boom. That's right.
Yeah.
Also joining us from the West Coast, our friend, our Portlander, and just generally nice guy. It's Ted. Hello, sir.
I didn't know if you're talking about someone else when you said nice guy, but sure. We have escaped the weather the rest of the nation has, and it is cool and mild here. And I am sorry to everyone because I know this has been rough, especially in the South. So
because it's your fault, so that's why you're apologizing.
It is. I just walked outside and saw the bush that's dead from an ice storm from a few years ago, and so I know what the ice storms are like, but we don't have one right now, so I'm glad for that.
And then just mentioned just a few moments ago, we have Dr. Paul A. Craig, author of The Killing Zone. He's out of Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Do I have that right?
Well, I live in Nashville, but yeah, from Murfreesboro.
Oh, okay. That's where you work out of. I was close. I got pretty close to it. Well, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. Tonight, we're going to be talking to Paul about his latest edition of The Killing Zone. It would be edition 3. We have been very fortunate to get a copy of it. And I've read it pretty closely. I'm about 60% of the way through, and I've been kind of skipping around, checking some different things out, and really, really excited about tonight's podcast because there's a lot of really good stuff to get to. But want to go ahead and check in and see what everybody's been up to. I'll just tell you right now, we did avoid Snowmageddon here in Atlanta. But I have not been flying at all. Quite frankly, it's just too darn cold. I don't want to turn that engine over in this because we're out on a tie down. It would just be mean to the airplane. And, I'm not a mean person.
That's the range in which Mike Bush would call it a felony.
Exactly. And I certainly wouldn't want to commit any crimes. So what about you guys? Ted, what have you been up to?
Yeah, I was telling before we went on that I got up flying with Dominic, and we have had some really cold days and some really windy days, but we had a pretty decent day to get up and basically full blue sky. And so we went and flew around the mountain and had a great time. So It's one of those like rare winter times you get to do that. So yeah, I was glad to get up.
Mr. Siskin.
My instrument training has been disrupted by the ice apocalypse now. And so luckily, we got the plane into the shop for some things that needed to get done anyway, right beforehand. So thanks everybody over at Wing Nuts at Mike 91 Springfield. Very good people. Take your plane over there if you need something. But plane is sitting over there now, and I am at home, and we're just surviving. And as we were talking about earlier, there's all that food you have that has been sitting around for a while. That's suddenly, so I'm not going to lie. We do have some, we got some beanie weenies over here. We got whatever it takes to get by. So we've been doing that. Like I said, we've been very fortunate to have power. It's almost like our block is the only thing left in Nashville, except for Paul's block. Paul, you're on the east side, right?
Yeah, I think we're about 5 miles apart.
Yeah,
But, we're under a foot of ice. We had a little snow, but mainly it was ice.
I saw an Instagram post of some hipsters in a canoe going down the street over in your neighborhood.
I didn't know that they caught that on camera.
You're always on camera, Paul.
The canoeing zone. So so yeah, we're doing fine here, but it's been pretty awful here, and we have our share of storms and tornadoes and all this stuff. I think the real casualty here has been the trees. There's just been countless stories of just awful. Every tree half of the trees in the city are down. So
it's true. It's true.
It's really, and none of us have really been out to really see what's going on. So we'll see.
No, we've had power and internet, and we're one of the very few. My neighbors on both sides don't have either. And as Brian said, at any moment, this could all be gone. So
that's right. We're all excited about this episode, and right before we break into it, it's just going to be blackout and not be able to do it. Well, we want to remind everybody we've got our spring event. We're calling it the Thaden Invasion. It's March 13th through the 15th at Bentonville, Arkansas. Victor Bravo Tango. You can see Ted is sporting our T-shirt. We've got quite a few designs of that. I've got actually one right behind me. That I'm not, it's too cold to be wearing short sleeves, but the response has been incredible. Check our website out. It's going to be the quickest way to stay up to date. We're updating as we go along, but just keep in mind, parking is going to be on a first come, first served basis at Victor Bravo Tango, Thaden Field. There's also Rogers Field is short distance away. And then we also have access to Sugar Creek, which is even closer, I believe, that is owned by Legends Air, and they've given us permission for those that want to camp out. They can use that space.
Grass strip with the clubhouse and the whole nine.
That's right.
One other thing I want to add too is that without just sort of jumping the gun here, I think we're really looking at the high possibility of there being a wings qualified safety event also happening, and we'll give you more info around that soon as things develop, but it might just be our first step towards some sanctioned legitimacy, guys.
Well, to get us across that sanctioned legitimacy, easy for me to say.
This is the problem, you see.
Exactly. We're going to see what we can do to get Midlife Pilot Podcast into NOTAM.
Yeah.
Then it'll be completely legit. So
that's our dream.
That's our dream. Got to shoot high.
Yeah. Well, Ted almost got that done at T82 this past year, but just not the kind of NOTAM you want.
Not the one you're looking for.
Yeah.
So, Brian, why don't you go ahead and hit the housekeeping?
Yeah, I'll knock this out real quick. You guys can join our Patreon community for Discord access and lots of exclusive content. It really helps us keep this thing going. And I'll say, we had a very large company approach us about a sponsorship situation recently that we will keep unnamed, but I'll tell you this: anybody that approaches us with anything like that, unless they're going to give us an airplane that we can put a Midlife Pilot Podcast logo on and pay for all the maintenance and insurance ongoing and fuel, we are going to keep this show ad free. So everybody that's on Patreon is helping everybody enjoy the podcast more with no ads. So 10% also supports Freedom Aviation Network's anti-human trafficking efforts. You can volunteer for them, be a pilot. They need all kinds of administrative help, all kinds of things. So just look them up. The links are on our website. For everything Midlife Pilot Podcast, feedback, send us feedback, merch. We've got merch and all the things. Go to midlifepilotpodcast.com.
And don't forget the ultimate guide to being a midlife pilot.
Yes.
Our documents on there as well. Please, it's free. Doesn't cost you anything. You don't even have to put an email address in there.
Yeah.
So. Ted, what about our new Patreon members?
Yeah, we've got some new people I want to thank this week. At the Landomatic level, we have Matthew D. At the Hershey Bar level, we have SoCal Grumman. That's Vince. and we have Kevin A. And at the Beast Stole Kit level, we have HL, who is a rescue rat. And he had some issues, and so he resubscribed. He's never really left us, but he gets to be introduced again. And
nice.
Then the legendary Romeo Lima Hotel, Ron. You can say who he is. Yeah.
Yeah. Ron Horton.
Ron Horton. DPE,
yes,
multi-engine.
He was my DPE for commercial, and he's been a mentor of mine, and it was really nice of him to step up. So thanks to everybody who's stepped up and helped us out as a patron.
Yeah. The most charitable DPE in aviation.
I mean, if he passed through my commercial, he had to be very charitable, right? Is that what you're saying, Brian?
Hey, look, you just told him that you already failed the Power Off 180 before you even did your commercial. So,
you did it. That's
yeah.
Right.
You got that out of the way as a private pilot.
Yeah, just go ahead and knock that out. Yeah, I've already done it once. So, So tonight, as everybody can see that's watching us on YouTube, we have Paul Craig with us. Paul is a career CFI. He started in 1974. He's taught hundreds of students, also based near the Bachelor at Super Charlie. He's at Middle Tennessee State University. He has a master's in aerospace education and a doctorate of education. And I'm told he's not to be confused with the Scottish MMA champ, Paul Craig. I'm sure he's not the same, but maybe.
Maybe.
We haven't done a lot of research to rule it out, so we'll just leave it up to the audience to figure that out. So we're really glad to have you. As Brian has said, your books, the multiple editions, and your other book that I read as well, the Killing Zone books are kind of what I feel like is the Bible of the Midlife Pilot podcasts. We've done countless episodes on climbing Mount Stupid and trip, fall, succeed, and everything that kind of comes into this. So we wanted to start out by just kind of setting the table with your ethos. And we're talking about these mishaps, and it's not about blaming somebody. It's about becoming better pilots. It's meant to create conversations rather than be the conversation. So, and please feel free to expand on that. It is a shame that if we don't take some of these accidents and learn from them, it feels like it's a crime not to do that.
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me back. I just love hanging out with you guys and just telling the stories and all the things that you guys have done. Hershey bar level here.
Nice.
And
yes, that's right.
We appreciate you guys so very much. But Ben has a good point. I'm an educator. I'm not an administrator. I'm not an enforcer. I mean, when you look at, when you read some things about some accidents, you'll come across some on occasion where you can say, well, that was very foolish that pilot did that, or that was really very careless. Okay, well, that may be true, but it may be that an FAA down the road might take umbrage with that and even have an enforcement. But that's not my job. I'm not an enforcer. I'm an educator. So the first thing we just get out of the way is when we use aviation accidents as teaching tools, we there's no blame. It's not like we're saying, hey, this guy screwed up. Yeah. Because that's not helpful. The bottom line is we didn't know. I wasn't there when the accident happened. I don't know what other factors, what other pressures were on that pilot. And if I were in the same situation with those same pressures, who knows, I might have made the same decision. So this is an all in this together kind of thing, not a us against you and you shouldn't do that and that kind of a thing. So that's really kind of an important place to start, I guess. So thanks for bringing that up, Ben, because that's really the attitude I take. The title of the book, The Killing Zone, is always something asked me about. When I first wrote the first edition, I guess that was back in 2000. Wow. My original title was The Danger Zone. But you might remember there was a song by that same title that was attached to a very famous aviation movie.
No, never heard of it.
So to avoid copyright issues, my original publisher thought The Killing Zone was the way to go. And it is a stark title. It's hard to here's your discovery flight and here's your book, Killing Zone. That's difficult. But the idea is that it is kind of a jarring title. It is supposed to grab you by the shoulder and say, these kind of things can happen to us, any of us. And so that's why we have to be so on the ball, so honest with ourselves about where we are, what our personal minimums are, all those kind of things that we talk about. So that's kind of where it came from. I started the data work on the first edition in 1983. I did start flying in 1974. That was my first solo year, but I was a flight instructor starting in 1983. So I figured if I start there with my count, then I will be talking about things that have happened on my watch since I was a flight instructor. And so sure, that's the first one was about, I think up through 99, and the second one was up through about 2011. And I didn't even know there's going to be a third edition. I didn't know. But as the last 12 years have shown us, there's a lot of things that have happened. A lot of things are new. The older editions are still good lessons, but, and some things, haven't changed, but a lot of things have changed. So that's where we are.
Yeah. I think, people still, have problems with the fuel selector and, crashing a plane with one empty tank. That hasn't changed. On the other hand, you didn't write previously about using GoPros.
Didn't.
on flights. So, those are things that have changed in the last little bit.
Yeah, things have changed. I mean, nobody had an accident in an airplane in 1999 because they were taking a selfie.
Yeah.
But it has happened more recently.
Yeah.
So that's a new that's a new thing to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. The story of this book, going from the second to the third edition is actually how we met. And I don't remember who it was in our Discord, but somebody posted and said, the book isn't available because our people normally buy the book when they are a student or when they first get their license. And that's just, it's kind of expected in our community. And they said, we can't buy the book. And so I kind of looked around a little bit and then I contacted you. I just tried to reach out and find a good email address and, thankful you're at a university. So that's posted and found out the story there, which was the previous publisher didn't care about aviation anymore. That wasn't even on their radar and they weren't terribly interested in posting a third edition, but ASA, who does all the training material in aviation, was interested in picking it up. That means that it switched hands between publishers. And so the old publisher isn't in the business of distributing it anymore, and they don't own the book anymore. So I assume they just kind of just cut everything and weren't distributing the book. So there was that time where nothing was available and our people were so confused by that. So
yeah, that was very confusing.
Yeah,
that's true. The previous publisher was McGraw-Hill. I did 10 books with them over many years, and I had a good relationship with them. I really did. I really liked working with the editors and producers that on those various books. But you're right. It's just a business model. They kind of got out of the aviation book business. Meanwhile, I know the folks at Aviation Supplies and Academics, ASA, and I'm just kind of, maybe it's old fashioned, but I like to know who I'm working with. I do things with a handshake. And they're just excellent to work with. And they're just so part of the aviation community and such promoters of aviation. So I was really excited to be able to go work with them. I had done some work with them before, but I hadn't done a project like this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I guess in the same time, they also moved offices. They've been in Seattle for dozens of years, and all of a sudden they're moving offices, and so they can't release your book. It was just, it seemed like just everything at the same time.
I don't know how much that delayed it, but yeah, they did move to Kalamazoo, Michigan, where Greg Seattle. Robbins is his home base. And so they're set up now, but they did have to move a lot of stuff 2,000 miles in the winter across the Dakotas. So,
Well, Paul, we want to talk about a lot of things around this book. In fact, we discussed just having you read it to us for the entire episode.
Let's not do that.
And, that way we could just be the audiobook version. No, the idea is the zone that we're talking about is, for those who don't know anything about this book, is really about trends and groupings of data that you've identified that are meaningful. And as you said, you started in 1983 because it was the first data set that was definably on your watch. And then the second edition next. And then now we're in this sort of third sliver of data that you've taken. And one of the things that I really want everybody to be very clear on and understand is there's a lot of aviation content, for lack of a better word, out there that is speculative or perhaps exploitative. And this book has your approach has such a different angle because it is data driven, data informed, and not data driven in the same sense that it's like Michael Scott following the GPS right into the lake, right? But it's data informed. And what I want, maybe you can walk us through the path, and you do explain this in the book and go to great detail visually and textually to sort of explain all this. But I would love for the audience to understand, and please take as much time as you need. We're not in a hurry. But I would really love to hear how you aggregated this information, how you looked at it, how that compares to maybe past practices, because I know that some of the categories and ways of searching are overlapping and all this. So just walk us through the data precept and foundation for the entire book.
Well, sure. Let me say that I didn't start off knowing that there was going to be something called a killing zone. I was just counting numbers and counting data, and so I used the National Transportation Safety Board, their data, also some of the what we'd call the NASA forms information as well, Aviation Safety Reporting System. So these are everything is public information. And so I started off by trying to figure out, as a flight instructor, I have my own concerns, my own issues, my own questions. And in original research, it turned up that sure enough, there was a greater probability of having an accident when a pilot was in the zone of about 50 to 350 flight hours. Now, when you say that, you got to be careful because it's really easy to manipulate and mislead with these numbers, because if you just take the raw numbers, if you just count stuff up and say, hey, private pilots, they have more accidents. Well, of course they do. There's just more private pilots. You'd expect them to have more accidents because there's just more of them. So You can't really use just raw data like that. You have to figure out a way to come up with the ability to factor in exposure to risk. What is the exposure to risk? And when we do that, we can come up with rates, not just raw numbers, but accident rates. And that's tricky sometimes because, I'm not a statistician. I'm a pilot. If I were a statistician and I would look at this data set, you'd notice that, thank goodness, accidents, they're rare, right? They're rare. They don't happen very often. An accident that takes place out of 10,000 flights is an outlier. And if you're a statistician, you kick out the outliers. If we took 100 people and we gave them the private pilot knowledge test and they got their scores and we averaged them, but there was one guy that went in that day and he was catching the flu and he didn't feel good and he made a 27. Okay, so are we going to average that 27 in with all those others? If we did, it's going to draw the average down and we won't really get a good picture. So what statisticians will do is they'll just throw out the 27 and they'll do the more representative sample. But when we have an accident data analysis, we're only looking at the outliers, right? So that's not really a statistically smart thing to do. So you got to have this little inner discussion with yourself saying, it's not going to be perfect. So are we going to let the perfect be the enemy of the good? Because it can't be perfect. Do we just don't do it at all? Yeah. Or do we get it as close as we possibly can? And that's the side I come down as a flight instructor. I want to know as much as I can about what's going on. And so, trying to figure out the accident rates is the key. In the second edition, there were fewer accidents, but there still was that zone, that about 350 to 350 zone that still had a higher accident rate. And let me just take a second and make one quick illustration about these accident rate ideas. It's called normalizing the data. And I wrote some numbers down because I knew I wouldn't remember them. In the last 12 years, the time period of the third edition, in the state of California, there was 968 accidents. During the same time, in the state of North Carolina, there was 254. Almost 4 times more accidents in California than in North Carolina. So if you just look at these numbers, the raw numbers, 968 versus 254, man, it looks like California is a really dangerous place to fly. I mean, they got more accidents, 4 times more than North Carolina. Okay, but wait a minute. In order to expose the risk factor in here, I did a little extra research and found out that in the state of California, during those same years, there was 40,993 pilots. And in North Carolina, there was only 8,336 pilots. So when you do the math that way and turn this into a rate, it turns out that California has 1 accident for 42 pilots, while North Carolina has 1 accident for 32 pilots. So even though the numbers look crazy different, North Carolina has an actually a worse rate than California, even though California had so many more. Right. You see what I'm saying? So you got to really be careful how you attack it because if it can easily be misleading if you're not careful. Now, when we do accident rates, we don't actually use numbers of pilots in a state. That was just an example, because in any given state with its pilots don't fly the same amount of flight time, right? I mean, there might be some people who fly 10 hours this month and some people who fly 2 hours this month. So there's really no way to make that the average. So the NTSB, the Air Safety Foundation, the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, instead, they use the accidents per 100,000 flight hour rate. Okay. So now, how many accidents does it take for the exposure to risk of 100,000 hours? Well, first of all, the 100,000 hour thing, nobody thinks it's perfect to begin with. You know, it is a calculation based on a lot of different things, surveys, fuel sales, 100-hour inspections. I'm not sure all the factors they put in. So nobody believes it's 100% correct. But if you use the same formula every year, then there's a baseline that you can follow. Okay. So now when we start figuring this out, we can get a little bit more accurate count, and not just the count, but the exposure to risk included. So now when you go to the National Transportation Safety Board databases, you can slice the data all different ways. You can find out how many accidents happened at night. You can find out how many accidents happened during IFR conditions. You can find out how many accidents took place at night during IFR positions. You can slice this any way you want. What you can't do, it's just not there in the data filter, is to find out how many flight hours a pilot had on the day they had an accident. That's just not there. The only way you can find that is to read all the reports. Okay, so between the 12 years of the last edition, or third edition of the book, there was, I think, 12,406 general aviation airplane accidents. I didn't count helicopters, balloons. Somebody can do that.
Yeah.
I didn't count airlines, didn't count military, didn't count air taxi. This is just general aviation airplanes, both amateur built and factory built, just if it's an airplane. Okay. Also, in this third edition, I wanted to go a little deeper. I didn't just look at fatal accidents. I looked at all the accidents. So in order for me to find out how many hours a pilot might have had on the day they had their accident, I had to read all those reports. So it's just 12,000 of them. And so I went through every one. Now, not all of them are complete. Not all of them have that information, but I think 96% of them did. So I thought that was a high enough number that could be relied upon. And so ultimately what we're trying to do is apply these rates and figure out, does the killing zone, does it still even exist? You know, the good news is the total accidents are down and the rates are down. That's the best. We can end the show right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But even if we have one accident, I'm still upset about it. and I'm still passionate to stop that, even that one. And so that's why we keep doing what we do, what you guys do, what you do. And so it turns out that, yes, the evidence shows that there is a higher rate of accidents when a pilot has that 50 to 350 range. Now, let me be really careful here. Okay, this does not mean that when you have 350 hours, you're dangerous. And when you cross 351, you're safe. Okay?
Yeah.
Also, and this is true, that if the accidents rates are higher in the 50 to 350 range, and you're in that range, this does not predict your future, right? Your future is in your hands, not these statistics, okay? The accidents that have already happened, we can't stop them, and they can't hurt us. What we can do is use them as a tool, of the accidents, all those 12,000 some odd accidents, 17.5% were fatal. Okay. Well, that's terrible. But that means 85% or 83% were survived. And of those, 72% were the passenger and pilot left the accident with no injury or minor injury. 72%. And only 10% was rated as a serious injury. Okay. So now those pilots, that's 83% of accidents that were survived. That's about 8,000 pilots. And you got to figure some of those 8,000 pilots are with us here tonight. Right? Yeah. And so my message...
I was going to advertise my accident, but I guess now that the
well, I wasn't going to point out anything specific.
Been featured on page 71.
Yeah, right. Here's the number. No,
I'm messing with you.
No, my message is, some people could think, if a pilot had an accident, they must not be a very good pilot. They must, they got in an accident. They must have been careless. Okay, I don't buy that. I don't buy that at all. Number one, I wasn't there when the accident took place, but more importantly, if you have been in an accident and survived it, then you are the poster child for telling all the rest of us pilots that this can happen to you. Yeah. Okay? I mean, not a single one of those 12,000 pilots in accidents in the last 12 years were thinking they were going to be in an accident as they drove to the airport that day. That was not on their mind. If it had been on their mind, they probably wouldn't have continued their drive to the airport, right?
Right.
So it can happen. And this attitude that, accident data and all, it's interesting, but those are for those, careless pilots, those people, I'm really on top of this. I go extra mile. I really plan well. I check the weather, and so this is important, but it's kind of for the other guys. And I know that sounds simplistic, but sometimes we have that attitude kind of creep in on us when we don't even think about it. And so if there's anything that we should learn from this, is that those pilots that were in fatal accidents, okay, they've left us an organ donor card, really. Yeah. That's what they've done. So that we can learn from this, not pointing fingers. It's a tragedy. We lost one of our own. Okay. But can we learn from it? And if we do that together, we'd be better off. And one of the first rules of this is that you can just never say, as you read a story about a pilot did this, that, or other thing, well, I would have never done that. I would have never, I'm smarter than that. I would have never done that.
I'm so glad you're saying that, by the way, because that is something that all of us feel looking over a lot of these, because they are just excruciatingly frustrating circumstances around many of these noted stories.
Well, it's really, there's no value in them unless we learn from them.
Yes.
Right. I mean, why would we even care? I mean, these are accidents that have happened. Some of them have been tragedies that have happened. The only reason we would even take our time would be to see what we can do to take advantage of it. But the way you take advantage of it is to understand, instead of saying, well, I would never do that. You don't know what pressures that they were facing. I think maybe I've mentioned this before, but if you look at all the 365 days of the year, in the last 12 years, which day of the year had the most accidents? Well, it was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving.
Oh, yeah.
Why? Why would that be? Well, most people work on Wednesday or at least Tuesday before the Thanksgiving holiday. Thanksgiving's always on a Thursday, okay? And so if you've made plans to go somewhere and you can't really make the decision to go or not until the day of the actual flight, and you've got people counting on you, and there's pressure to get there, you know, those kind of pressures are for real and very hard to duplicate in training.
Yeah.
Right.
This is why I want to abolish all holidays, by the way, but that's for another podcast.
So on Thanksgiving 3-4 months ago, in 2024, on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, I was a nervous wreck that day. I was, because I'm thinking, if history repeats itself, people are going to be, in an accident today while I'm prepping for Thanksgiving. There's actually more accidents the Friday and Saturday after Thanksgiving as people try to get back.
Yeah.
The Christmas holidays seem to be very safe. Not a single accident before or after Christmas. I think because Christmas is a longer holiday, right? It's not always on the same day of the week. And people do have more time off, so they can make their plans. So if the weather's not going to be good, they can still drive and make it to Christmas. But the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, the option to drive is already gone, and that puts them in such a position. And so the idea that you're facing pressures that change your aeronautical decision-making is something you have to always keep in mind. Because if it was just me and my aeronautical decision-making, then I wouldn't make those same, I wouldn't be in that same position. I wouldn't make that same mistake. But we all are going to be in that situation from time to time.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to the big game. We got tickets. The game starts Saturday night. You know, you can make up a million scenarios where well-meaning, wise, meticulous pilots still make some decisions given the pressure that sometimes we find ourselves in. So that pilots that have been in accidents, they're not careless. They're not bad pilots. They're wiser now and can give us lessons now than before.
Humility is you kind of bring the point up. Humility is a very hard thing to teach at a flight school. I did read where somebody tried to rush them along on a day when it wasn't really good for flying. Maybe I read it in the book. I can't remember. And the instructor had no intention of going up, but he wanted to see if he could pressure his student into taking the flight. And they went out to the plane and they cranked it up. And then he finally said, "We're not flying today. I'm trying to teach you a lesson about." I was in that boat. I remember a couple of years back when it was all over the internet with the Vegas Bravo Buster. And I remember saying to myself and saying to others, how could that guy be so bold to do that? I would never do that. And a week later, I actually busted the Atlanta Bravo because I got distracted by my son and I climbed about 500 feet. And that was for me a defining moment in that I think when you read these stories, when you say this could never happen to me, that was a huge piece of humble pie that I ate that day. And I recognize from that point on, any of the stuff could happen to me.
Did you just yell at me and say, "Ben, but you already cleared me.
You cleared me. It's my airspace. Clear them out of my way. I'm almost out anyway."
Don't you know who I am?
Yeah.
Well, I think there's I don't know how many actual accident stories are in the book, 100 or so. I don't know exactly the number, but I mean, and every time you read one, just tell yourself, I'm going to put myself in that pilot's shoes. I'm going to put that pilot's headset on.
Yes.
And see, you know, what I can learn from this and not just blow it off.
Exactly. I've gone through about 60% of the book, and I had a couple of questions, and it's more about how you gathered the information. And I think regardless of the data, there's a theme to pull from it. when I was going through the approach to landing, it was it said, I wrote a note, 91.6 were VFR, and that means the rest of them were IFR, which completely surprised me. I thought there was going to be a lot more IFR accidents, people shooting below, when they were below minimums and they tried to drop down. And when you're going through this data, I'm assuming you're just reading it, and as it comes in, you don't have any type of expectations from this data, or did even that one surprise you?
It did a little bit. You got to be careful about the categories. It might have been the reason that the landing one is so heavily skewed to VFR is because the highest probable cause for those accidents is what I think the FAA calls it abnormal contact with the ground. In other words, they landed too hard. Okay. And so every one of these accidents has what's called a probable cause, and it's probable cause, not definite cause, because we don't know for sure. It's not definite. So it's the probable, this accident was probably caused by this. And the IFR approaches that might, for instance, what you brought up, if someone were to get too low, that might actually be a controlled flight into the surface that was at the end of an approach.
Right.
So what I tried to do is I tried to give the whole picture of what had happened. And the NTSB does a great job, but it's not a narrative, right? It's sort of the facts, just all the facts. And so I tried to piece it together. If it was a flight into terrain, but it happened with a 200 overcast, in my mind, that's a factor.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And by the way, there's some in the chat that will say that most of my landings are unusual contact with the earth. Is that how you described it?
Contact with the
contact with the ground.
Go.
That's kind of going to be some of mine.
I think we all have a few of those.
That might be a new T-shirt. Yeah.
I'd already written that down, by the way, as a T-shirt idea. Yeah. So, I've got it right here.
One of
the T-shirt will be out by the time this podcast is over.
Exactly. Yeah. I've kind of said to myself, actually, since before I flew in other contexts, but don't write those first couple lines of your NTSB report.
Right.
And I think some of us have been in those situations. I certainly have, where you're like, I think I just wrote 2 sentences of this, and it's going to be hard to defend this if that's how this comes out.
Well, if there was ever a wake up call, a red flag, that's it.
I want to talk about the numbers a little bit more, which is you also have to, not only do you have to tease out the fact that these are outliers just by definition, but you also have to tease out that there are more low time pilots than high time pilots.
Sure.
It's the same thing of most accidents are within 3 miles of the home. It's because that's where all your trips begin. So there are more low time pilots. So how do you control for that?
Well, the Bureau of Transportation Statistics has the numbers that they have, and of course they are estimates of the flight times that general aviation flies in a year's time. They then further break that down into personal flights and instructional flights, and of course that's what this is about. I didn't write a book about crop dusting. That's general aviation. I didn't write a book about power line patrol. It's instructional and personal flights, and using the numbers from the Bureau of Transportation Statistics on the one side and the count of the accidents and the hours that each pilot had on the other side, that's how the calculation was made. And the calculations are in the appendix, but nobody, I don't think, is going to go read a bunch of calculations. But just to give you the since you asked for numbers, okay. The non-fatal, I just got a couple here. The non-fatal accidents were 1.4 accidents per 100,000 hours, okay, in total. But of the accidents inside the killing zone, 50 to 350, that number jumped up to 1.81 per 100,000. Okay. And if you take that aside and just look at all the numbers outside the killing zone, then that number is just 0.69.
Wow.
So that zone clearly has a higher rate of the fatal accidents. Now, there's a lot less fatal accidents. As we just covered a moment ago, the fatal accidents, the number in general aviation is 0.21. So only less than a quarter of an accident, fatal accident per 100,000 flight hours. But inside the killing zone, that number is 0.13. So it's almost, that's outside the killing zone. I'm sorry, I gave you the wrong number. It's about 1.6 times higher rate inside the zone than outside the zone, for the fatal accidents. And it's about twice as many in the non-fatal accidents. So that's how it came about. And of course, when I set out to do these things, I don't know what I'm going to find.
Right.
I'm sort of like an umpire, right? The umpire is not supposed to be rooting for one side or the other. The ball comes across the plate, you call it a strike. If it doesn't come across the plate, you call it a ball. I was ready, eager, and hopeful that there would be no killing zone.
Yeah.
And so when the numbers started coming in, indicated it. Please understand the numbers in total are less than they were in the first and second edition. And that's great news. But nevertheless, it just tells us that we just have to be wary, and we have to be cautious, and we got to think things through twice, especially when we're in that zone. It's because we're inexperienced. I mean, when I guess I think about things in 5-year increments. You know, if 5 years ago, as I was flying, I thought I was okay. You know, I was safe, know what I was doing, but I know a lot more 5 years today than I did 5 years ago, right? And back 5 years ago, I didn't think it was a dangerous pilot or unsafe, but I know now, just from experience and time, that, I probably needed to know more stuff. And if you do that for your whole pilot career, 5-year regrets, you look back and think, man, at the time, I thought I was A-okay, but man, I was kind of an idiot, you know? So I think that's the growth. It's a lifelong learning thing, this flying deal.
This is where being married really helps also with keeping track of this.
Continually humbled. Yes. Ben?
Yeah. I wanted to also check in with you on about I know there's a chapter, maybe you can not read it, but give us an idea how technology has played a part, and really we are inventing new ways to crash an airplane, it seems like. And we were talking a little bit before the show that, there weren't selfies in 2007. So can you talk? I haven't gotten to that chapter, so I can't really speak to any of the specific stories, but can you talk a little bit about what's changed in this edition from the previous edition as it relates to technology?
Well, if you look back across aviation history longer than when I've been involved, that you can point to situations where when new technology was introduced, it was almost immediately followed by a spike in accidents. And these technologies that when they were introduced, they were designed to make it safer for us, to make it easier for us, make it better for us. But when not used properly or when not understood, they can do the opposite. So we have had more technology, thrust on us in the last 10 years than anybody could keep, just your head spinning. So it's a matter of trying to be wise and handle technology and learn its quirks and what it can do and what it can't do. And I remember once, I don't know what popped into my mind, but once upon a time, I was the flight instructor to the governor of Tennessee. And I took him flying in an airplane that had a Garmin G1000. It's the first time, this is a long time ago because those things were new then. And it had a feature that could call out traffic, only in a certain area, but still it would do that. And I remember that we were flying along, it had somebody in the back seat too, and the thing said traffic, 2:00. Okay. And the three of us, we all looked down at the primary flight display and and the multifunction display. And as we're all looking at it, I'm thinking, maybe one of us ought to be looking outside. I've never in my whole life had anybody call traffic and nobody looked outside. Okay. So I started looking outside because I felt guilty, that I wasn't looking outside. So I guess maybe that's not the best example, but if we over rely on technology, it can be problematic because it's not always right. And we have to use good common sense. I remember an examiner told me the story where he took off with I guess it was an instrument student for IFR check ride. And not long after takeoff, the applicant reached over and flipped on the autopilot and, continued to climb, at which point the examiner reached over and turned it off. Okay. And so no longer than 2 or 3 minutes later, they may be leveling off and the applicant reached over and turned the autopilot back on, at which point the examiner turned it off. Now, this might have been a generational thing. There was an age gap between these two. But the examiner's point was, I'm testing you on your ability to fly this airplane without the autopilot. Now, nobody argues that an autopilot's fantastic. I mean, we have airline crews that use the autopilot all the time. There are 2 people in the cockpit plus an autopilot. So having one person in the cockpit and an autopilot's got to be a very big advantage. I mean, in just the ability to hand flying the airplane can be tiring over long periods of time, and certainly in turbulence and things like that. So there's no question that it's an advantage. But if you use it to the point where you can't otherwise fly, should that thing fail or you get in turbulence, you get in really bad turbulence, you got to turn the thing off because autopilots will try to seek an altitude that's impossible and it'll beat itself to death. So sometimes you have to deliberately turn it off and hand fly in those circumstances. Ask for a block altitude because you're not going to hold the same altitude. Let ATC let you ride the waves a bit. So anyway, the point is, it's just there's such a thing as too much of a good thing.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if, and I see this as, I see this maybe in several of the stories in the book where and this also bleeds into stalls and a lot of things, but I feel like there is this disconnect where people are driving airplanes like cars. They just want them to go where they want them to go, and they're not, and maybe they're just being reduced to some sort of other kinetic primacy that they're driving some other, they go back to their driving primacy, I guess, on some of these things. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's easier to do when you have less hours. But I feel like there's just a lot of people that are forgetting that you're flying a wing or wings, and and that there are certain principles in play here that are really important. And you get into AOAs, angle of attack indicators, and you get into a lot of these things, but I'm just curious about how, do you have any sort of perspective on just this idea that maybe people are driving planes more than flying them for some of these mishaps?
I've seen airplanes with cup holders. That's very automobile-like, right?
Yeah.
No, I think you're onto something. I think if you look back across many years, that every time there has been a new introduction in technology, there's been some lamenting about, are we losing more than we're gaining? We're gaining efficiency, but are we losing the art to fly the plane? So that battle, that's be a great conversation Saturday afternoon at the hangar, whether or not, it's good, but and does the extra goodness that and efficiency and safety that we might have available to us is at a cost? Can we still fly the airplane? Can we still enjoy flying the airplane?
Yeah.
Can we fly the airplane stick and rudder and feel the wind? And can we, it's like, our fingers extend through all the cables and out to the ailerons. And we are not in the plane. We are the plane. did we lose that kind of thing? And the answer is some of each.
Do you think that there's a disassociative quality that technology brings into an aircraft that further mediates the experience of actual flight and the responsibilities therein versus the actualities of see and avoid? I mean, people forget that that's also what you need to be doing in IFR flying is see and avoid,
Sure.
So when you talk about people just eyes inside, and by the way, in my instrument training, I find it hilarious that I just thought, why don't they do the instrument rating first? Because all the instructors do is complain about how you got to get your eyes outside. Well, while I'm already tending to do this inside, let's stay in here, and then I'll But yeah, I guess I just wonder about, are we in this weird space right now technologically where there is a whole new digital native set of generational folks, younger people, that are perhaps just more, I don't know, just disassociated from the dire realities of physics and the risks that they're taking.
Wow, that's a lot. I don't want to be coming across as anti-technology.
Of course,
I don't want to be some old fogey that says, "Get that autopilot off my lawn."
No.
So it's a blend. It's using wisely is the thing. I remember I did a research project when automation in general aviation was first really coming out, and so when we had a computerized cockpit, to me it was really different. I trusted my life with all those round dials my whole flying career up to that point, and they never let me down. They never crashed. They never had to have a software update. They worked. And so that's, I was tending to be on that side. But the students part of the research we did through NASA, a NASA research project, was to let brand new pilots, people never flown before, let them fly these new computerized airplanes and just see what happened. In the early days, FAA thought there might need to be a new check ride to fly an automated airplane, or at least a sign off or an endorsement or something, right? And they were very worried about it. And then part of the project was to give them data on how to make that decision. Anyway, so what we realized was that the students, they were college age kids who flew these airplanes that were computerized. It was like nothing to them. They'd grown up their whole life with computers. Every school classroom they'd ever been in since kindergarten had a computer in it. So everything so what was the big deal? It was like, I was thinking that this is a computer in an airplane. They were kind of like thinking, well, this is an airplane around the computer. Does that make sense? I mean,
yeah.
And so it was just fascinating to watch. And it was not a problem. I mean, they just took right to it. So it was our job to try to figure out what things we needed to train right away for this automation, what things might be instantly obsolete that maybe we should stop dragging our feet. My flight school hasn't owned an ADF in decades. So are we going to shoot NDB approaches? I love an NDB approach. It shows great pilot skills, especially in the crosswind.
Yeah. Hey,
but it's obsolete.
So before we turn the corner, I want to make sure we get into the some of the mental health aspects and other things that you cover. Also drones. So I want to get into those things, but on this note, before we kind of turn the corner, are there any particular narratives or stories in the book that you'd like to maybe recap or synthesize for the audience that speak to exactly how some of these technology pieces have factored into a particular mishap that caught your attention?
Well, there's several examples. And I think maybe as this evolves, we'll come up with a better descriptor. Right now, I think it's pretty much called pilot-induced distractions, right? Where a pilot is fiddling with the GoPro so they can video their first solo, or they are taking a selfie as they pass by a cloud. And those are cool to have. But if it takes the pilot away from the job, this is what Brian said a minute ago. You got to pay attention in the car, but this is not a car. It requires even more attention than a car. And so I think there's several examples that have been very recent in the situation where some kind of distraction that the pilot brought on themselves led to a problem. And so that seems like it's just a matter of education. There are some things that you can do on the ground without even thinking about it that you really shouldn't do in the air because your attention has to be focused. And we're pilots. We're famous for, we invented multitasking. That's our thing. Okay. That's us. All right. And so we are capable of taking on several challenges at once and compartmentalizing, fix this, then fix this, and get a priority, get a sequence going. We're good at that. And so with that in mind, it's not a good idea to throw in one more distraction that really isn't part of that sequence. So I hope not, but I think we might see more pilot-induced or pilot-created distractions that have a in the category of technology. And there's a couple of stories in the book that were of that kind of thing, where someone distracted themselves. They were taking a video of their takeoff, stuff like that. And so that seems like just a matter of just education. There's only so much bandwidth, you got to be able to concentrate on things. And if you distract yourself more than you should, it's not a good thing.
Yeah, especially as a newer pilot, you're at the limit of what you can handle. Now you've added several things onto it. On the technology front, I want to hit Ugly Cub's comment here. He says, the worst part of ADS-B is that I see all the planes that I was missing in the past. Makes me want to shut it off. That is one of those. I get so bothered when a plane gets within 2 miles and I can't find it. It's the personal failing of me. Is 2 miles is my number, and I'm glad to know I'm not the only one.
Well, I didn't see the airplane that when I was flying with the governor that the technology told us was there. I didn't see it. I looked for it. And, had I not been told, I wouldn't have known where to look. I'm supposed to look everywhere, but I wouldn't have been able to focus. So sure enough, that's a really good point.
I want to switch to kind of one of my pet topics, as Brian said, which is mental health, because you cover that and related issues in this book a lot more than in the past, which makes sense. The FAA actually allows antidepressants now, and they didn't 10 years ago. I don't even know how to word this, but you give at least one example that happened before they were allowed. Somebody was taking their spouse's medication, and there's several issues, but the point being that maybe you'd be better off if you are medicated, even if the FAA doesn't like medication.
Right. No. This is probably, Ted, the topic that's had the greatest change in the last 10 or 12 years. In the second edition, I did a really poor job of this. And the only thing I covered was pilot stress. Yeah. And, that's important, but I mean, that's not the same thing as the mental health issues that we encounter. So I was bound and determined to do a better job. And I actually interviewed and worked with an AME who is a HIMS AME. HIMS stands for, I got it written down here, Human Intervention Motivation Study. HIMS is old. It's like from the 70s. I thought it was something like a new invention. Originally, it was to intercede for pilots who had alcoholism problems. And over the years, it has evolved into a more broader mental health issue. So here's the problem. If I seriously have a need for help, medication, and I'm a pilot, in the past, I wouldn't say anything because I would be afraid that I would lose my job, lose my medical, lose my career, lose the investment in flying I had made. Okay. So balancing those losses with coming forward to seek help, it was a very difficult challenge for pilots at all levels, general aviation, military, airlines, the whole thing. So we kind of found ourselves in a situation where in order to do a good thing, we were making it worse.
Yeah.
Right. So at some point, and I don't know who gets credit for it, they came to the realization that, maybe we should try to help resolve the issue rather than just cancel them. And so you're right. There was a hit list, and there still is, but there was a hit list of medications that if you took them, you would lose your medical. So pilots would not take them when they probably should have, or tried to hide it, which never seemed to work. And so there was this kind of like underworld of pilots who wouldn't come forward to seek the help that they needed. And it's not like, if I have the flu, I'm going to go get Theraflu. I'm not going to make my flu worse because I'm afraid to tell somebody I'm going to go take the medicine. So the chapter we have now on that topic, I hope I did a much better job. I know I did a better job than the last time because it just wasn't a thing. And I got a lot of the information from the AME, the physician that I work with and our school, and he's been very helpful in I guess taking back, I guess, the stigma. If a pilot really is in fact in need of some assistance, some help, then they should get it, not at the expense of their aviation career or their passion for flying. So does that mean it's a get out of jail free card? No, there's things that have to be. There's some things that people shouldn't have in their system when they're flying. But there's a much broader approach these days. And some of those, it's not a one size fits all. It's not you busted your medical, you're out. It's, we can put this plan together, and it may not be an overnight solution. People don't get into these situations of mental health overnight, so they're not going to get out of it overnight. So there are plans that are approved for people to follow to work their way back, even if sometimes it's not even to work your way back. It's not even that much. But you see what I'm saying? It's individualized. So we would rather not lose one of our pilots, of our community, just because they were doing the right thing for their mental health. So I think that's the message, that the FAA is in fact moving in the right direction. You may need to seek out HIMS, Airman's Medical Exam. They're not all trained to be HIMS, so you might go to your next medical with one that is and have this discussion. And having the discussion is not an automatic you lose your medical.
And let's be can we also just clarify that especially those of us in midlife do receive ads from time to time for an entity with the same name that is for a completely different purpose and probably shouldn't be combined with aviation. Just putting that out there, just keeping things on track here, guys.
Yeah. There are things that pilots should not have in their system, period.
Yes.
But that's what the HIMS, Airman's Medical Examiners, are for.
Yeah.
So it's a change in attitude. It's a change in just how things are viewed than it was a relatively short amount of time. And there has been some tragic situations that have taken place because pilots did not seek assistance because they were afraid. They didn't want to. They were afraid to talk about this taboo topic because it was going to cost them more than they thought they could gain. But health is important no matter whether it's physical or mental.
Yeah. Yeah. You covered the kind of some of the suicides that have happened in there, which you haven't in the past, and there are ones that are newer than that I was looking for, because it's tragic that those still exist.
They do.
And a couple things real quick. Number one is about 11% of people take antidepressants every year in the US in any given year. So that's 11% of people that wouldn't have been able to fly in the past. Number two, there's a great documentary from the New York Times called Light to Fly, which obviously is about this whole topic, which is, I'm not going to tell anybody what my problem is, or I'm going to do it and not tell anybody about it. And yeah, so those are keys to this.
Well, I think the fact that you brought this up and we're shining the light on it is very important, because this wouldn't even been a topic 10 years ago on the show.
Right. Well, for that final thing I was going to say was, that's why I'm a sport pilot, because I choose what to prioritize out of that. And that's changed in the last couple of years, but that's an option, especially for recreational pilots in the midlife. So put that out there. Ben, you've got some things you've caught on there.
Yeah, Paul, we had reached out to some of our podcast insiders, people at I believe it's the Beast Toolkit or Cap available. I can't remember, but we got a couple of questions that I wanted to hit on. This one comes from, he's in the chat tonight, our friend Chuck. He says, if there was one change or rule that you could make in GA to reduce the number of deaths, what would it be? After writing 3 books, he must have thought of ways, even mandated behavior changes, to make aviation less dangerous.
Well, that's a really loaded question. I think that we go a long way to preventing accidents, fatal accidents included, when we include in our training more of a scenario approach. One of my graduate students came to me one time and said that this whole thing of scenario training is going to the real world would be like this. If I'm a basketball coach and I get my team together and I say, okay, guys, today we're going to practice our passing. So you guys get in and you just pass for an hour. And you guys over here, you're going to practice your dribbling. So you guys just dribble around for an hour. And you guys over here, let's practice your free throws. You shoot for free throws for an hour. Is this group of players, are they going to be ready to go on the court for an actual game? They've got all the skills. They've done all the dribbling and the passing and the shooting. They've done turns around the point. They've done short field landing, right? But can they take this and apply it in the real world? I would say those guys that had only practiced just those fundamentals are going to get their butts kicked in an actual game with players who are savvy to what's going on.
Right.
And let's take that to aviation. You know, the scenario training is a part of the practical exams these days, which was a hard fought fight. So I would say that, and the more realistic you can be, the better it is. And I know that good flight instructors, let me say this, have always done a fair job of scenario training. It's not like this is we just invented this. It's a new thing. It's always been around, but you can look in most any pilot syllabus for like private pilot. When you look down through there, and maybe after a pilot's done some cross-country type training, there's going to be a lesson where the instructor is going to say, okay, we're planning this to Chattanooga. Now, the instructor knows, the student knows, everybody at the flight school knows, you're really not going to Chattanooga. This is the diversion flight. Okay, I've talked to my buddies. They've been on lesson 21. And so you take off, headed for Chattanooga, and then at some point, the instructor's kind of by surprise, oh, look, the clouds are too low, or, oh, look, there's a thunderstorm. What should we do? Okay, so what do you do? So now the lesson now becomes the skill of just going to another airport or turning around and coming home. That's not a very difficult decision in that circumstance. You got to always remember that in the real world, there was a reason you were going to Chattanooga in the first place. This was, your grandparents' 75th wedding anniversary party, and you're expected to be there. In fact, you're bringing grandma with you. All right. There's going to be a consequence if you don't make that trip. Where in the training scenario, there's no consequence. You just say, oh yeah, right. This is clouds. Let's go over here to, Centerville. So there's no reason. You're not going to get in trouble with anybody. You're not going to disappoint anybody because you didn't go to Chattanooga in that training. So that's sort of a scenario training that's not really realistic because it doesn't include the real pressure, right, of arriving at your father's 60th birthday. Maybe you need to forego this, take the family heat, but you're there for his 61st birthday.
Yeah, I love this because I'm seeing some of this in my IFR training right now where you already know the outcome of the approach when you're practicing it. And so we should modulate that to be, don't know what it's going to be. Don't know.
Yeah, I never answer
I see the runway. Do you see the runway? I don't see the runway. You know what I mean? It should be because the going missed is such a busy, hectic change of circumstances, and you need to be weighed with the surprise, the unknown of that, as opposed to just going, we're going to go missed.
Well, in IFR training, there's one question that I never answer an air traffic controller, and that's this. They'll say, cleared for approach. How will this approach terminate? Now, if I'm the instructor and you're my student and I say, well, we're going to go missed, I've just told the student what's going to happen.
I think you should.
I've removed the decision from the student.
I think you should say
someday when they're flying the approach and they're expected, they're not going to know what really is going to take place. So the controllers get a little ticked off because they like to know if you're going to make the go or not. But I'm just not going to answer the question.
I think you should say, you should tell the controller, as the author of The Killing Zone, I can tell you that there is a 31% chance.
I'm probably not going to do that. But you see my point. What I will do is I'll tell the student before we go that the ceiling is at, let's say, 500 overcast. Anytime we're above 500 AGL, we're going to wear a view limiting device. Anytime below 500 AGL, you can take it off. Okay. So I don't know whether we're going to get under or not. Depends on the approach, but I'm certainly not going to give it away because if you've been in a situation like that, and think about it, it's a dumb question. You're never going to hear, United Flight 219, how will this approach terminate? No, they're going to land. The whole point of carrying these 300 passengers is get them to the destination. So they're not going to say, I think we'll make a missed approach this time. These people can be late. They'll miss their connections. But, so it's kind of a silly question and it's very training like.
Any other examples?
It's not a real world question.
Yeah. Any other quick examples of the sort of the absence of scenario based training? Well,
my first ever student that I ever signed off for a check ride, his name is John. And he had a really good job on the check ride. He passed. I was 1 for 1.
Good job,
batting
John.
1,000. Okay. And so afterwards, I asked John, so now you're a private pilot. What are you going to do with your certificate? He says, well, I'm going to fly my family to Disney World. Okay. And I lived in Tennessee at the time. And I remember thinking, wait a minute. What I've been doing with John is I've been flying around barns. I've been doing touch and goes. I've been, doing stalls and slow flight. I never taught him how to fly across the Atlanta airspace. I never taught him how to go that far, which would certainly cross different weather patterns. That was just not a part of the training. I was following the syllabus. I was doing the training as it was prescribed. And he was a really good stick and rudder pilot, and he's a smart guy. But it just hit me like a ton of bricks. He's getting ready to go do something that I never taught him to do because I never. So now all my students have to take me to Disney World. That's just the rule now.
Maybe New Orleans for some beignets,
Yeah, I mean, different places.
We got to mix it up a little bit.
Yeah,
different challenges. I wanted to ask another question. This came to us from One Dull Geek, and I'm going to change the wording a little bit. He referenced a report, or he referenced an article written by Mike Bush called Quantifying Maintenance Risk. It was published in October 22nd of 25 on AOPA's website. And it references a report called the Scarpazza Report, identifying accidents shortly after maintenance. And I'm curious if any of your research documents post-maintenance accidents.
Mine doesn't, but let me say this. If Mike Bush writes it, it's the gospel. I mean, so I would certainly follow his advice. I understand the circumstance. I do. I mean, when the airplane is in maintenance, there can be things that get left off or get, they leave a wrench, and so it may be in those first couple flights that a pilot discovers these things. It might be minor really, but could be something more major. So no, I am familiar with that research because Ted showed it to me this week. And so it's very, very valuable. It's very important for us to think about. I've had the same maintenance director at the school where I do flight training for as long as I've been there. So it's almost 30 years. And so he's just Matt Taylor, and he's just fantastic. And I trust him literally with my life, just like you trust your folks. And so it's so important to get to know them. I'm not saying he can't ever make a mistake. He'd be the first one to tell you that a mistake is possible. But it is, I guess, important to get in a rhythm and get to know your folks. And if you ever have, I always have my flight instructors. Maybe there's a day when the weather's not good and they can't fly. I always have them go and shadow one of my maintenance technicians on a 100-hour inspection.
Yeah.
Go with them.
Yeah.
Now, some maintenance guys aren't keen to this.
Yep.
Right. So you got to massage that a little bit. But no, the maintenance guys that I worked with, they are just as much teachers and instructors and educators as any flight instructor. And so when you go in and stand there and watch them, they hand you stuff and they ask you questions. First of all, you're going to gain a little of respect with your maintenance crew.
For sure.
That's very important. Number two, you're going to be able to teach the airplane systems so much better. You will understand the airplane system so much better. I don't have to be an A&P mechanic to fly an airplane, but I certainly do need to know my systems inside out so that I at least know how to properly troubleshoot, so when I can bring the airplane back down to the ground. That's my point. That's my job. And so, seek out a maintenance technician who's willing to let you tag along for, a day and, be there and help.
Right.
They might they might not want you to touch too much at first, but this is probably one of the more valuable things you can ever do.
Yeah.
Brian, I believe you have another topic.
Oh no, he's going to throw it to me.
Oh, sorry.
I think that you learn so much when you go in around your A&Ps, even if it's just, hey, can I take that cowling off for you? Just doing the simplest things for them. And you can also ask those questions that you have. So I've always enjoyed that. One of the other topics that you cover in here, which I'm glad you cover, of kind of things that have changed, is state regulation versus federal regulation. And what I mean by that is, in a lot of states now, marijuana is legal. It is not legal federally. FAA does not like it, which is fine. But we're in this situation where sometimes students ask, can I keep using my medical marijuana? Right? This is not something that existed 12 years ago when the last edition came out.
And Domino's doesn't have a fleet.
Yeah. So what have you seen about that?
Well, let's cut to the chase. Any kind of impairment, regardless of whether it's legal in a state or not, is not a healthy prescription for flying. You can say the same thing about alcohol. Alcohol is legal everywhere, but being impaired with alcohol will reduce the pilot's ability to fly safely, the same as marijuana or anything you want to otherwise mention. So just because it might be legal doesn't mean it's smart. And we certainly can use alcohol as the best example. It's legal, but it's not wise to mix that in flying. And I think that would go with any of those things. So just because in the last 10 years there are places in the in the United States where marijuana is legal doesn't mean it's legal in the airplane.
Yeah. I put tabs on my book of things I liked and or wanted to know more about, and I did notice this one example, page 246 of a marijuana crash, related crash. The guy had climbed over 18,000 feet, and in the wreckage
no
afterward,
oxygen.
No oxygen, which is the least of the issues. But there was the open 6-pack of beer, and he had marijuana in his system, and I think he had a couple other things in his system as well. It's just like,
This probably just watched Cannonball Run 2.
Oh, man.
That's probably where he got that inspiration from. So
yeah.
Okay, so that particular individual expressed or displayed extremely poor judgment. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we can't learn from this situation.
Yeah.
That was think about it. Any one of those three things, 18,000 feet without oxygen can make you impaired. Certainly alcohol can, and certainly marijuana. And then you mentioned some others. So that was like the triple threat. Flying is not difficult, but we still have to be at our best.
Yeah.
And those things are going to keep us from being at our best.
Yeah. I figure I'm barely smart enough to do this as it is. And I need to not have ways that decrease my IQ. And all three of those are things that make me worse.
I have two more things for you, Paul. I hope that you're billing us hourly, right? So
of course.
All right, so we can squeeze a little bit in here to get our bang for our buck here. But one of the things I wanted to talk about is, obviously we are a podcast that is directed towards midlife pilots, whatever that may be. Sometimes it is a mindset, sometimes it is a middle-aged reality, and a lot of things in between. But as you know, we are constantly trying to be informative and educational on some level, but also straying from the idea that we are instructors and authorities, and it's very important to maintain that distance for us. All that to be said, what would if you have the floor right now with primarily an audience of midlife pilots, people that are the types that picked it up in the middle of their lives, maybe after the empty nest, or to fulfill a dream, or to or in my case, fill an empty void inside that'll never be filled. But but just generally speaking, if you're directing anything you can about midlife pilots, what are the things that I've observed? What have you observed, Paul, that is the most important things you could relay to someone who's thinking about starting to fly in midlife, or is low hours in midlife? Because while low hours and 50 to 350 is climbing Mount Stupid, we also are very, or at least seemingly, we think that we are very risk averse people. We have fully formed frontal lobes and families we'd like to get home to and that kind of thing. So what could you direct squarely at the midlife pilot?
Well, first of all, if you are a midlife pilot, whatever that definition, however you define that, congratulations. Think about it. You have overcome a lot of things. How many times have you heard say, I've always wanted to do that?
Yeah.
When they find out I'm a pilot, I've always wanted to do that. I've heard that 1,000 times. And so the reason they haven't is for all the things you just said. When they were younger, they were pursuing a career. It was expensive. They had a family. They had other responsibilities. They moved around. They never had put down enough roots to work in one area. It wasn't their fault. It's just the dream that was just dormant for could be decades. So to be able to have the courage to recognize the situation that you're in, and you've been able to do something now that you haven't been able to so forth, and you've taken the leap. You've taken you drove past the airport how many times and didn't turn in? right? This time you turned in. This time you scheduled a discovery flight. Just congratulations for making that happen. And for those of you who are in that spot who haven't made it happen yet, come on, join us. Let's go. It is, we love this for a reason. And we'd like to show it to you, what that reason is. I want to commend you guys. For the last 3 weeks, you guys have been going through the ultimate guide to being a midlife pilot. And it's 23 free pages of download on your site. I've got it. And that is one of the best resources because you have so many things brought together in one spot. It would take you hours to go find all those resources if it was your own, and you wouldn't even know where to look, right? So it is a really valuable tool because it walks you through, how do you even start? What questions do I ask? Where do I go? And it is a very, very concise document. And I really latched onto it, especially the part about choosing a flight instructor, right? Look at this. I've dug this out. Here's this article. I don't know if you can see it. It says, select the best flight instructor. I wrote this article in March of 1987.
Wow.
Okay. We have been on the same page a long time because you do have to select the right instructor for yourself. As a young instructor, I always felt really intimidated by having students older than me. And I had a bunch. And I guess I got over it because I was just trying to be the best instructor I could. But at first it was a little awkward. This person is 10 years older than me and I'm the boss here all of a sudden. I'm, training them. It was a little unique. And so, that was something I guess I just had to get accustomed to, but teaching people who are not college students. Now, my career has been teaching college students. Just put it out there. Kids in the 19 to 23 range, but that doesn't mean I haven't done my share of working with biennial flight reviews and all kinds of things with pilots of different ages. And the one thing you notice right away about a midlife pilot is that they are mature. They have made decisions in their life, good and bad, some that worked out, some that didn't. So they practice at making decisions. And that's not nothing, right? I mean, if you're young and you haven't had many life decisions to practice with, then when you're faced with a real life and death decision in an airplane, humans get better at stuff when we practice them. And practicing making the decisions is very healthy. So
yes.
A midlife pilot who spent the last 25 years making sound decisions for themselves, for their business, for their family, for their kids. I mean, this is a life skill that they bring to the airplane that the 19-year-old, they don't even know what you're talking about. So, so that's probably the biggest advantage of a midlife pilot as someone who's learning to fly. So number one, congratulations. If you haven't gotten off the couch and joined us yet, come on. And when you get there, you'll see that you're in good company. It's like when, there's this fear I'm the only one that doesn't have them. They'll think they're laughing at me. That's not how it's going to be. And if you look at the guide, you'll see that what I'm telling you is true. So yeah, that'd be my best advice.
All right. And don't worry about getting back on that couch because you'll have to sell it.
Yeah.
Wow.
You sell the couch
You
before
can't
the
afford
training.
a couch.
Yeah.
Are you crazy?
Yeah. So
thank you for that, Paul.
That's very nice.
Yeah. Building on that, I kind of want to talk about the mindsets for people coming out of training. And, if you think about kind of killing zone and going into it at 50 to 100 hours and coming out of it, not really, coming out of it at 350 hours, what should the mindset be to a pilot at 100 hours? What about 351 hours? And what about 1,000 hours? How are they thinking differently?
Well, despite the principle and numbers of the book, I don't think you spend a lot of time thinking about the numbers. I think every flight's your next best flight. Every flight's going to be your safest flight, no matter what number is in your logbook. you got to figure that the reason, student pilots are very safe as a group. Very few comparatively. I don't have the numbers in front of me right here, but student pilots are very safe. And you got to, why? They're the least experienced. They haven't been tested. They haven't taken a written yet. They haven't taken a check ride yet. So how are they any safe? Well, you got to figure it's the flight instructor. And so when you leave your flight instructor, and you're on your own, and you're making your own decisions, and you don't need an endorsement that the instructor can withhold if they think you shouldn't fly today. Okay. Maybe that's why that 50 threshold is where the accident rate increases. Now, there's plenty of student pilots with more than 50 hours. I think I was. So it's not like a firm dividing line,
right?
But I think that that 0 to 50 being such a safe category is, we owe a lot to our flight instructors. And so when you're on your own, and you said 101, 351, 1,000, and every flight, before, during, and after, we need to learn something. We need to have a lot of fun. But unless it's safe, it's not going to be fun. So in every flight is it's a new challenge. And whether you have 1,000 or 10, you just take one step at a time. We can't think, well, now that I'm 1,000, I can rely on my 999 I've already had to not worry about this flight. That's just not a very healthy thing to think. So we just can never get complacent. And there's always something else. Have you ever taken a flight that was exactly the same as the previous flight? Never. No. Every flight's different. The wind is different. The visibility is different. Where you're going is different. The people you're flying with is different. The challenges you face with ATC is different. Every single flight is a new challenge. I've heard that if you want to just drive a pilot crazy, sit him down on an assembly line and have him put, a square peg into the hole all day long. That would drive me crazy.
Absolutely.
I've got to have a new challenge, and every flight is a new challenge. Even if you fly between, Nashville and Chattanooga 5 days in a row and in the same two destinations, different flight every time.
Yes.
Okay. So you got to remember that every time is going to be a different flight. You can't rely on how great it was last time. You got to make the next flight just as great by being as attentive as you possibly can, and being meticulous and all those things. People say, well, it's also a lot of work to think about all that stuff. Okay. Yeah. That's the job of being a pilot. And that's what gives us grants us the ability to have the joy of flying, because we prepared ourselves.
Yeah. There's so many things too. You bring up, say, okay, direct flight to Chattanooga all the time, or anything that's routine. Even though those things vary a lot, they can still, within a slight level of variation. So for instance, you could always improve, and you could say, okay, last time I did direct routing, this time I'm actually going to more deeply think about why am I going direct inner? Why am I not looking more deeply at this terrain and trying to find a better route? Or, there's always some, even if it's just the planning, there's a million things to improve on all the time. But, when you talk about meeting challenges and in aviation, I can't think of a greater challenge than writing a book about aviation. And I wanted to ask you before, as we begin our descent here, I wanted to ask you, as a person who has done some writing, in and around aviation, what advice would you give to people that want to contribute to aviation? There's a lot of different aviation journalism or aviation publications, or just personal blogging, or reflecting on your own experiences. I mean, there's things like Airfax that'll take open submissions and consider them. There's a lot of ways to go about this, but from the perspective of an author that's written many books,
right?
What would you recommend or give advice for?
Well, first of all, there's so many more avenues today to do exactly what you just said than there was when I started the first time. I just showed you that magazine. What was it? Private Pilot. I don't even, that's even a magazine anymore. So that's been almost 30 years. And so I wrote some magazine articles, but think of all the different things you can write, avenues and platforms. There was no such thing as a podcast back then. So I think I would encourage people to use their voice, bring their experiences, share those things with others, and use any of the platforms that we have available to us today that we didn't even think about or even dream of, in those times. So sure, I say that what lessons you have learned is very valuable. Keeping them to yourself will help you, but we pilots, we have to get together and share our stories sometimes, because none of us will live long enough to make all the mistakes and recover. You got to learn from others so that you can, be smarter along the way.
Rising tide lifts all boats. So we got one more question. This comes from our chat, and it comes from my friend Nathan Ballard, Safer Flying. He said, I'd love to know, let me put it up on the screen here. I'd love to know what Paul's scariest / closest call he has had in GA to maybe wrap this up.
Wow. Well, I'm a flight instructor, so I've seen the earth come up at various angles and various speeds. I've had a lot of abnormal contact with the ground, as we've said. You always have to wait till the last second to see if I asked, is what's going to happen going to hurt me or the plane? If so, I got to kind of save it. If not, I got to let it happen, because the student's going to not learn if I save it every time.
Right.
I don't know. I was flying back at the university. I've flown a lot of trips where we do recruiting, sports recruiting. So we flew to Mississippi, I think, in search of linebackers. And on the way back, I got it was a twin Cessna. I got a hydraulic low pressure light. And in that airplane, not only the gear, but the flaps, we're flying in the clouds. And so I had one of my students who was my co-pilot. And so there was a very low overcast. And so I said to the student, when we get to the outer marker, we'll put the gear down, see what happens. And so if it doesn't come down, then we're going to come up with a plan. So we get there, we put the gear handle down. I got the green light on the left and nose wheel green light, but not on the right. Not the right wheel is not a green. Okay. So on that airplane, you have to turn this valve and switch that. And there's a bottle full of air pressure. And if you get it just right, you pull it and the air pressure zips down those lines and throws the gear out. So I was afraid to put the gear down too soon, because I have a full load of big guys, big football players, big football assistant coaches. And so that was like, strike one. Strike two, I have no hydraulics for sure. And number three, I'm thinking, if I have to go around, if I have to make a missed approach and have to climb out, and I don't expect it to happen, but if I had an engine failure then, I didn't think I was going to get out of that mess, right? That would have been strike three. Some people call that the Swiss cheese. I like the baseball analogy better. So anyway, we wait, and I tell my student, we're going to wait until we see the runway to blow the gear down. If we don't see the runway, we're going to, we'll make the missed approach. And, at that point, we had two healthy engines. We didn't expect it to be a failure, but you always got to plan ahead to what might happen, right? So sure enough, actually, my student saw the runway first. We were kind of in a crab angle. It was on his side. And so we saw it. I pulled the bottle. My theory was that normally the air pressure goes down 3 lines, both main and the nose. But since the main and the nose were already down, all that pressure had to go through the single line. So the gear came down all right, but it flew out like it was a boulder hit the airplane. I was afraid it was going to keep going. And so we touched down about 20 seconds later. We never tell the football players. We never tell them anything. NCAA regulations say that you got to take football players, college athletes, back home. There's only so many hours you can keep them on campus. So now I had to get the airplane fixed to take them back like 48 hours later. So we did. We had it all fixed. There was a problem with the hydraulics that had leaked all the fluid out. Got the air bottle recharged. Fly back down to Mississippi to take them back to to home base. And so everything's fine. It's VFR. I'm downwind. I put the gear down. It goes, slides in and clicks into place. 3 beautiful green lights. And we land. And as soon as we land, one of the coaches came forward and slaps me on the shoulder, like really hard. And I said, what? And he said, we thought you forgot to put the landing gear down. Because, of course, the last time they were in the plane, it went boom when it went down. They didn't hear the boom, so they figured we were crashing. All right.
That's fantastic. That's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, that's in flight times.
So that was going to say that.
Flight times is all a bunch of stories that have a happy ending.
Oh, so much.
It is.
Yeah.
Very well written book. It's out on Amazon. Please, after you read the 3rd edition of The Killing Zone, go ahead and get a 2-for-1 and get Flight Times. I really enjoyed. That was one of those books that I kept reading, and I just didn't want it to end because each story gets better than the next. So I appreciate that very much. Paul, man, this has been awesome. We're so thankful for you coming on and spending this much time with us. It's really been fantastic. I want to remind our audience to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Gentlemen, anything else for the good of the order?
I just wanted to let everybody know that we do have this. We ran a good show here tonight. We went long. This is probably gonna be a 2-parter, but in that amount of time, we were able to create an abnormal contact with ground T-shirt.
Told you.
And it's already on the website.
Incredible.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
And I've got to get up on a little soapbox here, which is when you're learning to fly, when you're learning anything, your time is linear. You can learn from the amount of time you put into something. If you've logged 100 hours, you have 100 hours of experience. The way you get more is by learning from others. The way that you get experience in these abnormal circumstances is by reading a book like this, is by humbly looking at crash reports, not saying they were dumb, I would never do that. Thinking about that could have been me. I could easily have been that person. How am I not going to do that? And that's what a book like this does. That it's what a book like this puts us in the correct mindset to learn from does. And that becomes a multiplier on, hopefully, on your safety. And so I just want everyone to kind of keep that in mind, is you can learn from more than just your flight hours.
Well said.
And yeah. So,
and that's a great segue, because Paul, every episode I try to end out with a little witty saying or words of wisdom.
I always look forward to it.
And so I'm actually, with your permission, I pulled a line from your book that I'd like to read. It is in the section about VFR into IMC. And you say at the end of the chapter, it is much to ask a pilot to go from not so smart to incredibly smart action in a split second while under maximum stress. This is why flying VFR into IMC is so highly lethal. So that's what I have. Everybody in the chat, thank you for joining us tonight. We're signing off episode 165 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast. Goodbye, everybody.